Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be checking out Unruhe episode 4 of season 4. Unruhe debuted October 27th, 1997 and has agents Mulder and Scully on the trail of a serial killer who leaves behind disturbing images and photographs simply by thinking. The episode begins as Bonnie and Clyde are on the run from the police, but in classic Bonnie fashion, she decides now is the time to get her passport, something she probably should have done prior to doing whatever it is they did. But again, because she's super smart, she forgot her money in the car. On her way to the car, the Gordon's fisherman aggressively bumps into her, and something tells me he knows what she did last summer.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Oh yeah, and her boyfriend is kind of dead. I don't know what kind of passport photos this old man takes, but you're generally not supposed to have a terrified look on your face. Of course, this leads to Mulder and Scully being called on the case, because local law enforcement always seem to be useless in these types of situations.
The autopsy did come back on the dead boyfriend, though. It's a puncture wound through the left eardrum and into the brain, possibly from a long needle or awl.
Or maybe a fisherman's hook? With the boyfriend dead and the woman missing, all they have to go on are the weird photos that were left behind. The old man claims he took normal photos, and he's definitely not trying to cover up for whatever sick fetish he might have. Anyways, Skull Dog does a little digging around and has her own theory as to how the photos turned out the way they did.
You see this smeariness here? I'm thinking that it's heat damage. With the heater sitting under the film right there, the emulsion probably melted.
I guess the best she's able to muster is heat damage and expired film, but that's pretty damn weak even for Miss Swamp Gas here. But at least she has a theory. Mulder, he doesn't have anything. The agents are brought to the couple's home where we find out they were involved with mail theft. Seems this young lady worked as a sorter and was stealing credit cards and what have you, and her boyfriend was signing off on them. Ah, the good old 90s, when even scumbags could afford a nice house. The police seem to think she took off and killed her boyfriend for some reason, but Mulder, of course, thinks something else is afoot.
In the 60s, a bellhop named Ted Sirius became kind of famous for taking what he called photographs.
Yeah, so according to Mulder, the photographs came out the way they did because the killer was stalking the woman and projecting his thoughts onto the undeveloped film using psychic photography. Not his craziest theory, but why do the photos look like a Slipknot album cover? Little Miss Sunshine looks to still be alive, crawling out of the middle of nowhere and wearing only the finest in grandma nightgowns.
We did a preliminary tox screen on her, found traces of morphine and scopolamine.
Twilight snake.
Dental anesthetic?
She was drugged up, but as Scully notices, that's not why she's in the zombie state that she appears. No, it turns out she was given a lobotomy, and a botched one at that. Hey, didn't we just have an episode where people were having their brains poked at with sharp objects? Anyways, the woman starts to say Unruhe over and over, so at least she remembers the name of the episode. In the meantime, there's been a second abduction.
Du wirst deine Unruhe bald vergessen. Deine Unruhe vergessen.
Oh great, what are those wacky Germans up to now? The agents make it to the scene of the second abduction, and one of the victims seems to have been a Minecraft character. The most interesting thing about this scene is we learn Scully knows how to speak German, which I'm sure won't come in handy later in the episode. Scully tries showing Mulder a photo from the first abduction, but Mulder just immediately dismisses it, because, there's nothing spooky about it. While everyone else looks for fingerprints, actual evidence, all Mulder is focused on is finding photographs, something that most workplaces don't just have lying around.
This. And look, it's the same company.
Well, at least one of them was doing actual FBI work. Scully made a connection to the first crime scene and the second, but still, Mulder's like, yeah, that's nice, but spooky photo. Our serial abductor seems to have an old lady nightgown kink. Mulder brings the photo to the FBI crime lab, and with 90s computer power at work, they're able to make the photos look way clearer than they have any right to.
What about day laborers?
Mr. Iskandarian there says that his company doesn't hire workers off the books.
I don't want any trouble with the IRS.
That's right, Tom Atkins doesn't have time for the IRS. He's busy dealing with zombies and space slugs.
Thrill me.
Meanwhile, Mulder is still messing around with the photo, and they somehow manage to isolate a shadow within the picture, and Mulder instantly thinks it's the killer, and he's looming over his victim. While Mulder has fun with the photo, Scully arrives at another construction site so she can speak to the foreman. An interesting guy named Jerry Schnauz, a very German-sounding name I may add.
I'd like to ask you some questions about the day laborers that you hire.
What? Is this some IRS thing?
Man, these guys are all really worried about the IRS.
And don't forget to pay your taxes.
Hilariously, Mulder calls Scully back to tell her that he thinks the kidnapper has really long legs, simply because of this stretched out shadow he found in the photo. And the look on Scully's face, like long legs, stilts, as she realizes she's face to face with the killer. Although I think those shifty eyes should have given it away from the beginning. The guy attempts to run, but there's no running away from Scully. Jerry is brought in for questioning about the missing women and murdered men, and it turns out old Jerry boy has quite the history. In 1980, he nearly beat his father to death with an axe handle and spent some time in the crazy house. Since then, he's been caring for his father as a way to make up for what he did. But here's the kicker. His father just died recently, around the same time all these kidnappings and murders started. But there's no way the two things could be connected.
Is your father?
Where'd you get that?
Well, this is weird. The old man Mulder found in the photo was Jerry's father, and these Slipknot members are called Howlers. The cat is out of the bag now, and Jerry informs the agents where they can find the most recent kidnapping victim, although she didn't exactly survive her botched brain scrambling. The case is basically solved. However, Mulder can't seem to let those damn Howlers go.
What the?
Jerry's about to be hauled off to his jail cell, but pulls an Uno reverse card and manages to escape. His weirdo psychic photography powers don't seem to be working all that well though, because he shot the cop in the throat, not his head. Anyway, Scully comes barging in because there's been a robbery at the pharmacy where the very first attack took place. Looks like Jerry ran off with all the film and enough twilight sleep to knock out an elephant. Scully heads outside to pull the car around because they're going to check the apartment buildings around the job site, just in case Jerry has paid a visit. Oh, for f***'s sake. I might have to start a counter for every time Scully gets abducted. Mulder! Well, it doesn't take Mulder long to figure out she's been taken. When her image appears in a random photo he gets developed. They don't have much to go on at this point. Jerry is switching cars to make it harder to track him, but Mulder does discover that Jerry's father was a dentist, and what do dentists use? That's right, twilight sleep. So the only reasonable thing Mulder can think of is to search Jerry's father's old dental office, which appears to be completely abandoned. I guess it wouldn't be nearly as spooky if it was just part of a strip mall. Jerry took his father's dental chair so he can perform his little operations, but hey, at least he keeps a clean and sanitized working area.
Du wirst deine Unruhe bald vergessen.
Aufhören!
Hey, remember when Scully briefly mentioned earlier that she could speak German? It shocks Jerry because you're generally not expecting someone to start dropping some German on you, but it might be the thing that saves her ass. You know, Jerry isn't exactly a bad guy. He knows those pesky howlers cause people to do and say things they don't mean to, and all he wants to do is remove them from Scully's brain. Where's the harm in that?
If there are such things as howlers, Jerry, they live only inside your head.
I'm not sure that was the smartest thing to say to a crazy guy waving a giant spike in your face. He takes a photo of himself before he gets the party started, and I guess it shows him that he won't be around much longer, even though we don't get to see what it is exactly. In the meantime, Mulder pulls a horseshoe out of his ass and realizes the 6 fingers in the photo represents the 6 headstones where Jerry's father and his army pals were buried. So that must be where Jerry is. And boy was he right. But he better hurry the hell up because Scully's about to be turned into a Jeffrey Dahmer zombie. Mulder wastes no time in blowing Jerry away, which is something I wish he would try more often when it came to cigarette smoking man and his goons. Unruhe is one of my favorite episodes from season 4, and it all comes down to the very creepy performance by Pruitt Taylor Vince. He can almost be seen as sympathetic because obviously he's not quite all there and has some issues, but at the end of the day he was killing people, even if he did think he was helping them in some bizarre fashion. Jerry's dissolve from normal into psychotic is pretty creepy, and his body language, especially his eyes, only add to the nightmare. Interestingly, Pruitt has a condition called nystagmus, which is how his eyes move back and forth so quickly. My dumbass always thought he was just moving them side to side rapidly on his own. Nystagmus can be involuntary and voluntary, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Pruitt probably has voluntary nystagmus because it seems he's able to do it at will, though I can find nothing which clarifies which type he has. Regardless, it does add to the psychosis his character goes throughout the episode. They had been trying to get Pruitt to be in the X-Files since season 1, but he kept turning them down, citing that the parts were too small. Vince Gilligan, the writer of this episode, really wanted Pruitt for this part after seeing him in the very disturbing film Jacob's Ladder, and after a little poking and prodding, was able to convince him to sign on. One thing I want to point out is despite how good Pruitt is at playing a creep, I was shocked when it was revealed that he would be playing Jonathan Kent or Pa Kent in the upcoming Superman movie. When I saw the announcement, I was like, holy shit, it's Unruhe! There's no way I'll be able to sit there and watch Pa Kent spout wisdom to Superman without thinking he probably has some lobotomized women in his cellar. I have no real intention of seeing the James Gunn Superman movie, as I'm burnt out on superhero stuff, but it's fun to see someone go from playing one of TV's creepiest serial killers to one of comics' most wholesome dads. When the episode came out, it received a little criticism for having Scully abducted yet again. I guess some people were tired of seeing Scully in danger. However, the episode just prior featured a paralyzed Mulder that would have been killed had it not been for Scully's badassery. So I'm gonna push back against this narrative that Scully is always some damsel in distress, when throughout the entire series, these two have saved each other's asses countless times. And speaking of the previous episode Teleco, Unruhe was actually supposed to come out before Teleco. However, the show was in the midst of having its time slot changed from Friday nights to Sunday nights, so they decided to push Teleco out first as they felt Unruhe was a stronger episode and would leave a better impression when the show debuted in its new time slot. This was a very smart decision because Unruhe, in my humble opinion, is a much better episode. Like I mentioned, Vince Gilligan was the writer for Unruhe. It was inspired by a Time Life book about serial killers that he read in his youth. One serial killer in particular being Howard Unruhe, who also inspired the naming of the episode. On September 6, 1949, Howard went for a 12-minute walk carrying a Luger P08 pistol, an 8-round magazine, and more ammunition in his pockets. He took what was dubbed the Walk of Death, murdering 13 innocent people, then returned to his apartment where he had a shootout with police until he surrendered. Howard was apprehended but unable to be prosecuted as psychologists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to the New Jersey Hospital for the Insane, where he would remain until his death in 2009. On top of that super fun story, Vince also based the episode on Ted Sirios, a man who Mulder does mention in the episode, and who claimed he could psychically project his thoughts onto undeveloped camera film. Though his thoughtographs were usually blank, sometimes they would show a fuzzy image which could be interpreted in many different ways. Most skeptics believe Ted to be a fraud, and noted magician and skeptic James Randi claims Ted used a small tube of paper, which Ted called a gizmo, in order to channel his thoughts into the camera. However, it seems his little tube also had a small magnifying lens on one end and a small piece of cutout 35mm film on the other, which is really where the camera would pick up the image from. So it sounds like Teddy Boy was nothing more than a charlatan. Unruhe currently sits at 8 on IMDb, and that's exactly where I would put it. I really like this one. Jerry is really creepy, and so are his photographs of the Howlers, even if they do kind of look like the members of Slipknot. Next up is an odd one, when Mulder and Scully are brought in to investigate a dangerous religious cult, and Mulder recalls his past life in the episode The Field Where I Died. So what does everyone think of Unruhe? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. I really hope you're doing great. Hopefully I see you in the next video, and stay spooky.
Sunday used to be the quietest night of the week. Not anymore.
Stop or I'll shoot!
Don't miss what everyone will be talking about Monday morning.
There's been a second abduction.
Scully! I am on to you!
The X-Files on its new night, Sunday at 9, 8 Central on Fox.